All right, the next step after you have glued your design down to the metal and you've learned how to load the saw frame is going to be to start sawing. Sawing and punching holes. So to begin, I'm going to start out. So typically if I was teaching and everybody had a drill press, I would say drill all your holes first before sawing out the outside. But because I'm gauging this more towards beginners who don't have all the equipment and who may only have the hole punch, the Euro hole punch, or one of these hole punches, the little twist one, you need to, because of the clearance on these, you're going to need to cut out the outside first, depending on it. Gauge that, whatever your design is. Maybe you're able to reach, I could reach most of these spots, but right up in this area, I'm not going to be able to. So for demo purposes, I am going to just saw out the outside first. So first thing I'm going to do is grab my wax. You may have, whatever kind of wax you have. It could be candle wax. It could be, the Rio wax. This is Gems wax. I guess I don't know if this is Rio wax. Anyway, it could be just beeswax. It could be candle wax, whatever it is. The only thing I suggest is not using a scented candle because everything will smell like that unless you really love that scent. But that's a personal preference. So anyway, I'm going to use this one and I'm just going to drag my saw blade through it. Just once over. That just helps keep the life of the saw blade a little bit longer and helps you cut through the metal. And just to give you an idea, for those of you that are curious, we're cutting through 20 gauge metal. That's a pretty good middle ground. Just like I said with the 3/0 saw blade being the middle size of the saw blades, I would say 20 gauge would be a middle ground of gauges of metal. And this is all opinion based. A little bit opinion, a little bit when you look at the, the numbers, the gauges that are available and the size of the saw blades that are available, they both fall a little bit in the middle. So this is 20 gauge. It's thick enough that it's not going to bend all crazy on you when you're sawing, but it's thin enough that it isn't incredibly difficult to saw through, especially for beginners. So you want to start out by placing your metal and sawing in the middle of the V of the bench pin. And I start out at a little bit of an angle when I make that first initial cut. Ooh, do not have any tension on that blade. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so I'm gonna go at a little bit of an angle. And as soon as I'm in between both sides, I'm going to bring it straight up and down. Remember what I had said earlier. You want to make sure that you are, or what I said in the rubber cement gluing of the paper design down, you want to make sure that you're sawing counterclockwise if you're right-handed. So we start in the bottom right-hand corner of the piece of metal. Always your design down there. That way you don't waste the metal. You never want to put your design just straight in the middle here, because then you got to saw all the way from here to get to it. So you're going to waste saw blades, you're going to waste metal, and also we need to go counterclockwise. So it's better if it's down at the corner there. That way we can move the metal this way and our hand is always behind the saw blade as much as possible. You want to have as much of your hand holding down that piece of metal as you can so that it's not all floppy. And if you're new to sawing, it may hurt for a minute. Just stretch your hand out. Just take a break, shake it out. Eventually, if you saw enough, you won't feel it anymore. Your hand will be strong enough. It's just getting that muscle memory in there. All right, so I'm ready to go. Now that I'm already in between two sides, I made that initial cut. Now I'm going to keep my saw frame at a 90-degree angle and try to draw as straight of a line as I possibly can. And now I'm going to go straight, because this is a nice straight line, the edge of the diamond, I'm just going to go straight off it and knock that piece of metal off. And I want that bench pin to catch my saw blade and not my finger. Always remember to keep your fingers behind the saw blade as much as you possibly can. Every once in a while when you're doing a design, it may like sneak around the front, but you want to get it behind it as for the majority of the time. So now I have a new line I need to start, a new saw line. So I'm going to go again at a little bit of an angle just to get that initial cut. And you know what? I'm going to apply a little bit of the wax. And I'm going to go at an angle. There we go. Now I'm in between again. And now, as soon as I cut into it, I bring my saw frame straight up and down. And you want to use that entire length of that saw blade. You don't want to be running in place in a marathon. It doesn't get you anywhere and you exert a lot of energy. So you want to use the entire length of the saw blade the whole entire time you're cutting. Now I got a little bit of a bend. That's not much. Got a little bit of a turn, I should say. So I just sawed in place, turned my piece so that I'm faced my design edge again. And now I'm going to saw as straight as I possibly can against that edge. Okay, I got a little bit of a turn again. I'm going to saw in place, saw in place, saw in place. And you can blow some of that metal dust out of the way. And now that I'm lined back up with my design line, I'm going to go straight again. Okay, now I got to turn. So if I tried to just turn like this, my saw blade's going to get stuck. And I'm not going to move anywhere. So I need to release that tension, let the metal and the saw blade fall back into place. Because what happens when you try to just turn without sawing, the teeth are going one direction and your design line's going a different direction, and then it's going to break. So you need to just let loose on the left hand if you're right-handed and you're sawing with your right hand. Let the metal loose. Don't let go of everything, but let your hand off the metal, and then come back, let it all fall back into place, and then press up on the saw blade and come back down. That way your blade won't break and you'll be free of it being in that stuck position. So once you're free and it's moving again and you need to make that turn, you're going to saw in place. I'm not making any movements. I'm not sawing anywhere. it's basically like bobbing up and down in place and turning your feet so that you're faced a different direction. There we go. So now I'm faced that direction. I want to get in line with my design line, and then once I'm on that line, then I can move forward. And I'm going to use the entire length of that saw blade. And again, you want to make sure that you're trying to make long strides and less of this. You don't want to do this like you're hacking away at something. You're going to hurt your shoulder and your arm. You're going to feel your temperature rising because you're going to be gripping the saw frame all crazy. So you should have a pretty loose grip on the saw frame. If you feel yourself tensing up, just try and breathe and relax, loosen up your grip, and then long strides. All right, I'm getting close to the end there, so I'm coming close to my bench pin so that the bench pin catches my saw blade. There we go. Try not to saw into your bench pin. It's not the end of the world. It's just exerting a lot of energy on your behalf. And you'll get stuck in there and the blade will end up breaking. So there we go. Now I have the entire outside surface cut. The next step is going to be punching the holes.